everyone thinks that the Mackenzie Shirilla case is black and white. But the way Davyne Flanagan talks about it proves that she's relying on emotion, not evidence. Today, we are untwisting the logic behind her claims. Welcome back to the Notorious.tv, your home for all things scandalous, eccentric, and over the top. If this is your first time here, or if you're not familiar with the Mackenzie Shirilla crash, check out my other videos, especially Twisted Sister Part 1. There was a lot of engagement on that video. I mean, it really felt like I said a lot of things that people were already thinking. And before anyone hits me with the classic, do your research comment, I mean, hello. That's exactly what my deep dive videos are for. I'm walking you through the evidence, the contradictions, the receipts, the replays, and the parts that nobody seems to slow down and actually look at. There really doesn't seem to be a lot of good nuance out there surrounding this case, so I'm filling a gap. And as part of that today, we're talking about Christine Russo's counterpart, Davyne Flanagan. She's the sister of Davyne Flanagan, who also tragically lost his life alongside Dominic Russo in a car crash where Dom's girlfriend, Mackenzie Shirilla, was driving. Mackenzie's in prison, going through the motions to get a new trial, which I'll have a video about that next week. But back to Davyne. She recently launched a YouTube channel to open up and tell a little bit more of her story following her appearance in the Netflix documentary The Crash earlier this year. And so today I'm going to break down some of the logical fallacies, the misinformation, even the emotional reasoning and grief-driven narratives that shape Davyne's content. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel before we get into it. And with that said, let's talk about it.
And for her parents, they're acting like we, the victims, are putting these cases together. No, not at all. Like, we aren't the ones who are, investigating this. The detectives, the people who went to school for this are the ones who came up with this conclusion and have this evidence. And that is why it happened the way it did, because that is the facts at the end of the day.
What you just heard is called an appeal to authority. It's the idea that something is true simply because an authority figure said it. Davyne genuinely believes that investigators and prosecutors are infallible because they went to school for this. As if a degree magically shields someone from bias, tunnel vision, or human error. But here's the thing, appeal to authority becomes a logical fallacy when the authority figure is biased. And prosecutors fit that mold perfectly because their job literally is to secure convictions, not to be neutral truth tellers. So ask yourself this, would Davyne use the same logic if Mackenzie were found not guilty? And will she use the same logic if Mackenzie gets a new trial and isn't convicted of murder? Appealing to authority is not critical thinking. It's outsourcing your brain. You made it this far, so you are officially part of the Chaos Committee. You might as well like this video and hit subscribe right now. And if you want proof that authority can be wrong, let's talk about Michael Morton, a Texas man who spent 25 years in prison because a district attorney intentionally withheld evidence. Not accidentally, intentionally. They hid a bloody bandana, and they also hid evidence of another man lurking near the house. That DA, Ken Anderson, he went to school too, and he was still wrong. He was still biased, and he was still punished. Disbarred, arrested, publicly disgraced. Although unlike the man that he sent to prison for more than 2 decades, Anderson only spent 5 days in jail. So no, I don't blindly trust prosecutors and investigators just because they have a badge or a degree. And neither should Davyne, and neither should you. Another pattern in Davyne's content is her tendency to cherry pick statements from the Shirillas and twist them into personal attacks so that she can stay offended.
If it was just Davyne in the car, she wouldn't be in jail. It would have never left the juvenile court.
While Davyne and the internet try to spin this into a racial bias, he was actually referring to his allegation that Dominic Russo's mother was an attorney in the same jurisdiction. Now, do I know that there were political ties there? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's what Steve Shirilla was saying. It was an attack on the court system, not Davyne. Then there's Natalie Shirilla's new friend remark.
And Davyne, he's a new friend. I'm so sorry.
What does that mean? His life is worthless?
No. God, no, not at all.
When we were in court, Mackenzie's mom said something about Davyne just being like a new friend, and the judge immediately was like, oh, so he's just like backseat cargo, and I was like...
Now, as you just saw, Judge Nancy Russo rudely interrupted Natalie Shirilla mid-sentence and misread her statements as minimizing Davyon's life. In context, she meant that Mackenzie had only recently befriended Davyne. It's a timeline clarification, not a value judgment. Here's what she likely meant. Davyne was a new friend, and she cared about him. She had no reason to intentionally hurt him. But that's the sentence that she never got to finish because the judge was clearly waiting on an opportunity to pounce in, and the families latched on to the judge's interpretation because deep down, they wanted it to be true. When someone is chronically offended, context becomes optional.
Parents didn't actually start being parents.
So Davyne blames Mackenzie's parents as if parenting determines whether a teenager makes mistakes. But plenty of people with great parents end up doing dumb things. And every teenager has skeletons in their closet, especially if all of their text and phone calls were dumped online for strangers to just comb through and read on their channels. I mean, I wonder what we'd find in Davyne or anyone else's personal life if we dug deep enough. People say that Mackenzie's parents never disciplined her, they let her do whatever she wanted, they let her just run amok, she had no rules, but like, we weren't there. We don't know that. So now let's pivot into something else that just drives me absolutely crazy about this case.
Another thing I think people forget is that Landon and Rosie refused to talk to any detectives and police after everything happened. The only time they ever spoke up is when Netflix reached out.
What actually happened here is simple. Rosie and Bubba had delayed cooperation because they were afraid that the cops were more interested in their drug use than the crash itself. And if they didn't talk to the cops at first, that's 100% their right. Delayed cooperation does not equal guilt. Lawyers tell people not to talk to the police all the time. It's actually really good advice. People pay a lot of money for that advice. But Rosie herself says that she did, in fact, speak to the prosecutor. She was fully willing to testify at trial, but she never got a call.
It's cool to be friends with your kids, I guess, if that leads to them being addicted to nicotine because they started in 6th grade and you were okay with them smoking weed underage and now they're intellectually behind. Yep.
Girl, what? I'm sensing a pattern here. Okay, it sounds like some authority figure in Davyne's life told her this and she just kind of ran with it. And who knows, maybe she's referring to the 2026 University of California study. It's the one that's partially funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Huge shocker. An anti-drug agency funds a study that concludes drugs are bad. I mean, it's like asking Starbucks to fund a study on whether caffeine improves your personality. You have to read studies critically because correlation does not equal causation. Davyne said that she thinks that Mackenzie's brain didn't fully develop because she smoked weed as a teenager. Okay, so are we applying the same logic to Dom, to Davyne, to half of Gen Z, millennials, baby boomers, pretty much half of the entire population? Or does the cannabis-induced cognitive decline only apply when Davyne needs to make Mackenzie look intellectually inferior? Because if she actually believed this study, she would have to admit that her own brother was affected too, because those birds of a feather were flocking together, okay? And we both know that she's not gonna do that. It's about as likely as Christine Russo admitting that her brother sold drugs. It's okay to acknowledge facts and things that actually happened that were true, without implying that they deserve to die in a terrible crash. So if you're someone who can't separate those two things, save your keystrokes, okay? I'm just not buying it. Not because science is wrong, but because the funding source tells you the conclusion of this study before you even read the abstract. And these studies never seem to account for the stuff that is actually proven to impact cognitive development, like poverty, trauma, unstable home environments, sleep deprivation, nutrition, mental health, school quality, and hello, social media addiction. Ironically, some studies actually show that cannabis has neuroprotective properties. So yeah, I would say take that one with like half a grain of salt.
Being said, I do think a lot of you guys forget that I was only a grade behind my brother Davyne and Mackenzie Shirilla. Was at a lot of parties Davyne was at involving a couple of these people, including Landon and Rosie, Dominic, Mackenzie, and everyone else that you have seen on the screen. Big question I got is if I liked Mackenzie before all this, and Long story short, no. She was the first person to ever peer pressure me into actually smoking weed, and my brother went a little haywire on her. And he knows how I felt ever since the first interaction.
I'm not here to invalidate anyone's experience, but let's be real. The decision to try pot for the first time was ultimately Davyne's. This is where the accountability gap becomes impossible to ignore, especially considering how often she criticizes Mackenzie for lacking accountability. The way she frames it, Mackenzie basically hypnotized her, dragged her into a corner, and blew smoke into her lungs. But if you're old enough to try broccoli for the first time, you're old enough to own that decision. You can't weaponize your own choices years later to build a narrative that someone else is inherently dangerous. But that's what happens when grief becomes the lens through which every memory is rewritten. Here's a conclusion that actually makes sense. Grief demands a villain. When someone dies tragically, families often need someone to blame. It's a coping mechanism, not a conspiracy. Look at the Karen Reed case, okay? She was tried for the 2022 death of her boyfriend. He was a Boston police officer. His name was John O'Keefe. And prosecutors claim that she struck him with her SUV while drunk. But her defense argued that she was framed in an elaborate law enforcement cover-up. In June of 2025, just over a year ago, a jury acquitted her of second-degree murder and manslaughter. Yet, she's still hated by the victim's family, who remain convinced that she is guilty. So my point here is that grief doesn't care about evidence or the lack of evidence. Davyne's mentality has been, Mackenzie killed my brother, therefore the evidence proves it. But that's just not logic, that is grief. And I would probably be the same way if it was my brother. So I'm not judging her for it because I understand that a sibling's bond is so strong. And if I were in her shoes, I would probably want somebody to be mad at too. You know, that's just the truth. But you still can't convict somebody off of feelings. But back to the Karen Reed case, I see a lot of parallels with Mackenzie's case here because Karen Reed was actually painted as a crazy girlfriend too, mentally unstable, vindictive, controlling. There were voicemails that were leaked that show her just being a psycho bitch.
Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your fucking niece and nephew. You fucking pervert. You're a fucking pervert.
But the jury still did not find intent beyond a reasonable doubt. And let's not forget, Karen Reed's first trial ended in a mistrial because the jury could not agree. And a hung jury is a very real possibility if Mackenzie does get a new trial. I'll be talking more about that in my video next week. So this is the pattern I see on Davyne's channel. It's advocacy dressed up as science, emotional certainty masquerading as evidence, and cherry-picking data to reinforce a narrative that she already believes. But this is going to conclude part 2 of the Twisted Sister series. If you haven't seen part 1, be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives about this case and others. And remember, I am not being mean, I'm being accurate. They twist their emotions into reality, and I am just simply untwisting it.